Chapter 1: The 50% in America. Setting the stage, America stands at a crossroads, divided between two conflicting visions of its identity and future. On one side stand the supporters of the Make America Great Again (MAGA) movement, yearning for what they perceive as a return to a time of American greatness. For them, this movement represents the reclamation of order, pride, and stability amid the turbulence of modernity. It is a deeply personal desire for a familiar and strong nation, a defiant stand against the perceived erosion of traditional values. Smith, 2020. On the other side is a movement toward progress, inclusivity, and a reimagined future where systemic inequalities are addressed, marginalized communities are uplifted, and diversity is embraced. Jones, 2019. For these individuals, progress means confronting America's flaws, seeking a more equitable society, and redefining national identity for the 21st century. The tension between past and future, nostalgia and transformation, define the struggle of our time. However, this is not a struggle that is uniquely American. Across post-colonial Africa, nations continue to wrestle with their legacies of power and oppression. Countries like South Africa, Zimbabwe, and Namibia remain deeply affected by the legacies of colonialism and racial hierarchies. Mamdani, 1996. South Africa's Truth and Reconciliation Commission, TRC, is a prominent example of a structured effort to reckon with a painful past as a path toward national healing. Tutu, 1999. Although imperfect, these initiatives acknowledge a crucial truth: genuine progress requires an honest reckoning with history, a lesson America has yet to fully embrace. Biko, 1978. While African nations have taken concrete steps to face their colonial legacies, America's journey has been more contentious and incomplete. The United States continues to struggle with engaging fully with its history, particularly regarding its injustices against Native Americans. Dunbar-Ortiz, 2014. This reluctance to confront the nation's past leaves deep wounds unaddressed. Selective memory, which highlights national triumphs while erasing uncomfortable truths, distorts the country's understanding of itself. For many Americans, the nation's history is often reduced to a binary struggle between black and white Americans, with insufficient attention paid to the Native American communities whose land was seized and whose cultures were systematically erased. Deloria, 1988. The Native American experience is a critical but often missing voice in the broader American narrative, one that sheds light on the complex realities of American history. The narrative of race in America is frequently dominated by the stories of black and white Americans, leaving Native American voices marginalized. These missing voices hold critical insights into the broader American story, a story that remains incomplete without recognizing the enduring impact of Native American exclusion, cultural erasure, and survival. Deloria, 1988. Long before European settlers arrived, Native American tribes thrived, building sophisticated societies with spiritual connections to the land. Stannard, 1992. Colonization, however, marked the beginning of centuries of violence, displacement, and systemic efforts to erase Native American identities. From massacres and forced removals, such as the Trail of Tears, Perdue and Green, 2007, to the establishment of boarding schools, the U.S. government engaged in deliberate campaigns to decimate Native populations and strip them of their cultural heritage. Child, 2000. One of the most brutal methods of cultural erasure was the establishment of boarding schools with the mission to kill the Indian, save the man. Native children were forcibly removed from their families and forbidden from speaking their languages or practicing their traditions. Adams, 1995. The trauma caused by this cultural erasure continues to reverberate through generations of Native communities, leaving scars of disconnection from cultural roots and ancestral heritage. Despite these atrocities, Native Americans have shown remarkable resilience, preserving their languages, traditions, and identities against the odds. Yet, their struggles and contributions remain largely excluded from mainstream historical narratives. The exclusion of Native perspectives contrasts sharply with the efforts in post-colonial African nations, where marginalized groups have been provided platforms to share their histories through truth-telling commissions and land reform efforts. Tutu, 1999. The history of Native Americans is marked by a long series of violent betrayals and calculated attempts to annihilate entire cultures. Events like the Sand Creek Massacre in 1864, where more than 200 Cheyenne and Arapaho were slaughtered, Brown, 1970, and the massacre at Wounded Knee in 1890, where over 300 Lakota men, women, and children were killed, Utley, 1994, exemplify a broader campaign to clear Native people from their ancestral lands. These massacres were not isolated incidents. They were part of a broader, sustained effort to eliminate Native populations from territories desired by the expanding American state. Beyond the physical violence, Native Americans were subjected to cultural genocide through policies of forced assimilation. As mentioned earlier, boarding schools were designed to strip Native children of their identities, leaving them disconnected from their families and traditions. Many children never returned from these schools, buried in unmarked graves that stand as stark reminders of a history that America has yet to fully acknowledge. Adams, 1995. The legacy of these schools continues to haunt Native communities, where the impacts of lost language, fractured families, and cultural disconnection persist. Child, 2000. Despite centuries of efforts to erase them, Native Americans have survived and continue to fight for recognition and justice. However, the exclusion of their voices from modern discourse perpetuates the erasure that began centuries ago. The lack of Native representation in education, media, and policy discussions fosters a distorted understanding of America's past and present, one that maintains a false sense of innocence and prevents meaningful reconciliation. Dunbar-Ortiz, 2014. The silence surrounding Native American history is not merely an oversight. It is a continuation of the erasure that began with colonization. While post-colonial African nations grapple with their pasts through truth-telling and reconciliation processes, America has yet to fully confront its legacy of genocide and exclusion. Mamdani, 1996. Recognizing Native voices is essential to completing the story of America, a nation built on land taken from its first people. Healing the fractures in America's narrative requires a commitment to listening to those long silenced. Native Americans offer unique perspectives on survival, justice, and resilience, perspectives that are essential to understanding America's past and shaping its future. Deloria, 1988. Acknowledging the mass murders, forced removals, and cultural genocide that targeted Native communities is a critical step toward national reconciliation. Only by confronting this history and giving Native voices the platform they deserve can America begin to heal the wounds that continue to define its present. In many ways, America's journey echoes that of post-colonial Africa, where societies have made difficult but necessary strides toward reconciling with their colonial pasts. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission, TRC, in South Africa, though imperfect, serves as a model of how nations can begin to address their legacies of injustice and build toward a more inclusive future. Tutu, 1999. While America has yet to establish such a national platform for truth-telling, it is clear that reconciliation will remain elusive until the country acknowledges the fullness of its history. This book aims to explore the parallels between America's and Africa's journeys of reconciliation, offering lessons that both nations can learn from as they move toward more inclusive futures. The path forward for America requires embracing its full history, including the often silenced voices of Native Americans. By acknowledging the atrocities of the past and listening to those who have been marginalized, America can begin the long and difficult process of national healing, one rooted not in erasure, but in recognition and respect for the diversity that has always been central to its story.